Then up here on the left-hand side, a big L shape. This is called the Cooper, at 29 stories tall. Between these two so far, you have about 1,000 residential units. And then we have the new one, the Reed, coming up here on the left-hand side, which is going to add an additional about 500 residential units inside here. Going to be all condominiums coming up here by early 2025. That's their goal right now. Had no faith in this project because this was the first place to live in the South Loop, and they weren't exactly convinced that that was going to take off. It did take off. It's worked out for them ever since, but they never got around to the other three. The rentals up top, the first floor is a kindergarten and a preschool, and then you have a public marina right along the river here. As you can see, I've also docked my boat for the winter here. But you don't have to live here to park a boat here, but if you do get a pretty sweet discount on that. But take a look on the right-hand side. I'm going to point out something a bit obscure, so I apologize if you missed it, but I'll do my best to describe it. And unfortunately, it's going to be very close to the sun at this point of the year. But you can see off on the right-hand side, there's a radio antenna in the distance. Not the radio antenna by the power plant here. I'm looking farther way back in the right. Radio antenna. See the Marshalls on the corner? Back behind the Marshalls, radio antenna way off on the right. You guys see what I'm talking about up there? So that radio antenna, all the way to the right, behind the Marshalls, sits on a site of where once stood a barn that belonged to a woman named Catherine O'Leary, who was largely blamed for the Great Chicago Fire. In other words, that radio antenna marks where the Chicago Fire began. Quick side note, the building that radio antenna belongs to is, and I couldn't make this up if I tried, the Chicago Fire Department Training Center. That is a real fact. We train our firemen at the exact geographic spot the Great Chicago Fire began. How about that? Before we talk about the fire, another quick FAQ. Alex, what is going on with this building over here? So with the two black smokestacks, this is the last remaining structure of the Union Station power plant. Back when it was a coal-powered plant. So it's been abandoned for almost 20 years now. It's got about $2 million of asbestos removal inside, so it's a bit tricky to get rid of at the moment. They're going to have to do something with it here soon, though, because we're expanding south, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But first, let's talk about the fire. So, 1871, 300,000 people. The city was also primarily made out of two things: cast iron and wood, which is great. By the way, it's cheap, and it's easy to build with. However, on the other hand, sort of, not so great, because it also meant the entire city of Chicago had a melting point of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. And when the city caught on fire mysteriously on the night of October the 8th, 1871, sad to say it, but the city didn't stand a chance. This fire burned down 66% of the city, left 100,000 people homeless, destroyed 17,000 homes and buildings, cost 250 people their lives, cost the city $200 million in damages, which in today's money is like $4.1 billion, and we don't actually know how it started. We know where, back where we saw behind the Marshalls there, but when it comes to how, it's a bit unclear. There's a very popular story, or urban legend at this point, of Catherine O'Leary and her cow, Daisy. If you haven't heard this story, it goes like this. The story goes that Catherine O'Leary, 44 years old at the time, poor Irish farmer, goes down to her barn on the night of October the 8th, 1871 to milk her cow, Daisy, at about 8:30 p.m. Daisy, allegedly, was feeling a little antsy, kicked over an oil lamp which was set up, which caught the barn on fire, and coincidentally, 66% of the city, it killed them. about the vessel. However, if you have a white souvenir cup, hold on to them. They're construction sites. We'll keep the door here.